David is the founder of Level 5. He has had the opportunity to work with organizations across the globe and across all market sectors, and he has built a firm that is dedicated to creating value for their clients' most important asset, their brand. And so we're really excited to receive his very unique insights today. On a personal note, I have known David for more than 5 years. His first book, The Value of a Promise Consistently Kept, has been a playbook for me since I met David. I've worked with him in a variety of capacities, and I'm really delighted that he's joining us today to talk about his newest book, The Brand-Driven CEO. So incredible insights to offer. Thank you, David, for being here. And if you'd like to share your screen, the group is now all yours.
And thank you very much for that kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to meet you all, albeit virtually. I wish we could be together, but under these challenging and unique times, it's probably best and safest that we do it the way we're doing it. So congratulations to the Chamber of Commerce for being able to pull this off. These things require a lot more production behind the scenes than people know, and you and Ashley and team should be very proud of yourself. So thank you for the opportunity. As Carla said, I want to talk to you today about not just my new book, but key themes that actually drove both the books that I've written. I also teach at a couple of the universities in their business programs at Queen's and at Schulich, and then Level 5. All of these are out distribution channels for the thinking around what I call, for business owners especially, your most misunderstood and probably most under-leveraged asset for growth, and that is your brand. And there's never been a time when brands have been more important than they are right now. We are surrounded by change, and the thing that can get you through change and through on the positive and growth side is that wonderful thing called your brand, because used another way, your reputation, what you stand for and what value you create in the market. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Very quickly, as Carla said, Level 5 is a company that I started 20 years ago. It is a strategy and consulting firm that is all about delivering competitive advantage, sustainable, profitable growth, all through the power of your brand. And we've done this against a vision of changing the way the world does business. Now, that sounds very conceptual and theoretic, but let me pause here for one moment and give you the reasons why I created the vision that I did for the company. I started my 40 years of being a brandaholic, I call it, at a company that 40 years ago was called General Foods, so today Kraft. And it had at the time an incredible training and development program for young people coming into the business world, as did companies like Procter & Gamble, Colgate, Unilever. These were all organizations that truly viewed their brands as assets. You were brought in to learn how to run a business. I then went from General Foods to American Express, where I ran the card and card marketing for American Express, launched the Platinum card. I don't know how many of you might have a Platinum card in your wallet. And then spent just under 20 years building up the brand management capabilities of Labatt Brewery. And Labatt at the time was more than just a brewer. It also owned, as you might recall, the baseball team, TSN, the Sky Dome, football team. You name it. It's probably easier to say what we didn't own at some point. It was such a huge conglomerate. And I had the good fortune of being responsible for all of those brands. And then that expanded into South America and the United States. We then did a merger with two families in Belgium and created a company called Interbrew, which is now AmBev, which today is the largest brewer in the world. And a lot of that came on the foundations of what they'd asked me to do, which was build our brand management capabilities globally. You've done it on that side of the Atlantic, we now want it globally. They said at one point you have to move to Belgium, and My wife made it clear we were not moving to Belgium. Just the timing was not right for a whole bunch of reasons. And as usual, she was right. It was a good thing we didn't move. And I joined up with 4 friends from my General Foods days, and we started up a company that you may or may not be aware of. It's called Chorus Entertainment. And Chorus, we had this wonderful vision of setting out to see if we could brand air. Because if you think about it, up until then, television, radio was really branded by its call letters, CHUM or Q107. Or so we said, yeah, you know what? I think we can actually create consumer brands, but it's really just air because that's all you're receiving. And we did. We created YTV, Treehouse Television for youngsters, the W channel. I know some of you might still watch today. So we really did accomplish a lot, but I stayed there for 3 years to get us up and running. It set me up to be able to go to start my own company, which I did, as I say, at level 5. I tell you that story not to show you how old I am, but rather it didn't matter what sector I was in. It could be packaged goods, food and beverage. It could be financial services. It could be entertainment. It could be sports. All of these different sectors all had one common denominator in terms of what drove their long-term profitability and growth. And that was they all managed brands. When I started level 5, had come to a stark conclusion that unfortunately the world had lost touch with what a brand really was. So I wanted to bring brands back into business owners and leaders' minds as a valuable asset. Brands are not your marketing. Brands are your reputation. You have to market a brand, and you need to market a brand effectively, but a brand is a much bigger concept. So we've done this for a whole range of, we've done it for now for over 400 clients, Canada and globally, some of them small, some of them large, and you can see multi-sectors. So again, I'm not here to show you all the work that level 5 has done. I want to share with you what I've learned as a result of working with such a broad array of different businesses. So we all want to have a great brand. I don't think anybody that's on our conference today would say that they want a bad brand. So yes, we all want a great brand, but first and foremost, what's a brand? So that we all have the same definition as we spend the next half hour together. So let's start, it's a rainy day. Let's start with a little bit of fun and games. So how many people know what that is? I see some hands. How many people know how to use something like that? Carla, that's not a good sign. How many people know what the connection between these two items are? Oh, very good. How many people know what that is? There's a little bit of, how many people know what that is and know how to play it? How many people actually know how to say hello before you know who's calling you? And remember making phone calls on something that looks like that. What about the connection between these two things? And I find it interesting because I said, if I told you that the thing on the right was a television, a bunch of hands go up. And I said, well, yeah, you used to make an antenna, rabbit ears at university out of my aluminum foil. Okay, but what if I told you that was a microwave oven? Different reaction. So the connection is clear. Anybody that's put aluminum foil into a microwave when you were at university knows what happened. Right? And finally, how many people know what that is or have ever used it? Okay. So I saw a pretty good disbursement of hands throughout that entire fun and games. And again, the idea here isn't to look backwards, but sometimes in looking back, we can look forward. The one question I want to ask you is, what do you think the one common denominator is for all of those different products that I just showed you? Well, the one common denominator is they were all created and managed as brands. The other common denominator is that they grew to become the #1 brand in their category. The number 3 common denominator is none of them exist any longer. Or if they do, it's at a much lower level of growth, profitability, and size and impact than it did during its heyday. Why is that? Why do these once proud brands, these things that led our lives, we used every day, we were loyal to, no longer play any role in our lives? Well, the answer, unfortunately, is change. The world changed, they didn't. They stayed the same. They met the exact same need that they'd always met. They positioned themselves and their value to the market the same way they always did. In fact, many of them, like the one you're looking at right now, people don't know this, Kodak actually created digital cameras. They were the first. They had a huge R&D capability, and their engineers came to them with this breakthrough, digital. And their board looked at it and said, "Are you crazy? This would put us out of business. We sell film. We produce film. We develop film for people. We are film. Get that thing out of here." Well, very short-sighted. If they had evolved their brand, looked at where the market was headed, they would have had the opportunity to be the creators and leaders of the digital phenomenon that we now live on with our phones. So the message I want to leave with you here is, while these were all created and managed as brands, they made the one fatal flaw of not listening to the market and not changing and evolving. I think today we would all accept the fact that with what we are going through, change is a given. Change is inevitable. The world has changed and will have changed in a permanent state in ways that we can't even think of right now, because we're still going through it. We don't know where things are pointing. We don't know what the new norm actually is. But what we all do know is that it will be different than the old norm. You can take that reality and you can use it to your advantage, which is what I want to talk to you about doing, or you can use it as a reason to not change, like all of the brands that I just shared with you. I know that with the mission of the Burlington Chamber of Commerce, they want to enable you to continue to grow. Well, in today's space, that means we need to change. One of the things I'd like to help you change is maybe your perspective of what a brand is. So a brand is, and this was my simple definition, and it became the title, as Carla says, of the last book I wrote, but a brand is the value. It has financial and reputational value. It actually captures value through incenting people, making people want to buy you again, become loyal to you. So it is value. You can measure this. Often it's trapped in the goodwill line on your balance sheet, but it is an asset that needs to be managed, thought of and managed that way as an asset. So it's the value of a promise. What is that customer-centric, ownable, credible point of difference that we are going to deliver through your brand in the market? Sure, there could be 10 flower shops on the main street in Burlington, but if you think of yourself as a brand, you'll figure out how you can be a flower shop with a difference. What is that ownable point of difference that inspires and differentiates? And then the value of a promise, this is the important part, consistently kept. What do you do to evolve your business system in order to make sure that you can consistently keep the promise that you are making in the market with all of your investment, with your marketing and sales effort? If I said I'd be here today at 8:30 to give you this talk and then didn't show up, Carla would probably kill me. But aside from that, you would all go, not so sure about this Kincaid guy, right? The value of my brand would have gone down because I didn't keep my promise to you. So it's pretty simple, but this is what great brands do. Do you honestly think people stand in the pouring rain at 4 a.m. to get the new Apple iPhone simply because they need a new camera or a new phone? They have to be the first with an Apple, because Apple has made you a promise and they've consistently kept it over many, many years. So think of your brand, think of your business over the course of today as an asset, but think of what's the promise I might need to evolve my promise to hit these changes in the market. And then what do I have to do to evolve my business system in order to be able to keep that promise? Because successful global organizations do look at their brand as something much bigger than simply marketing and communications. I like to use this visual icon of an iceberg. So it's the value of a promise. So everything that you see, hear, touch, feel about your brand, its advertising, its price, how you promote it, etc. But it's under the waterline where the real value happens, because in my 20 years working as a consultant through level 5, 85% of our clients drop the ball on the second part of this definition. They want the new look, they want the new message, but then they don't change their organization to deliver what the message is offering or promising to the market. And that's where the value gets lost. So as you think of brands a little differently, think of it as that two parts of an iceberg: what I say and how I'm set up to deliver it. Why is any of that important? Well, great brands drive growth, profitability, they help manage risk, and create sustainability through long-term value creation. Now, I would assume that for most of you, those things are important, especially in today's world. How do I grow? How do I sustain profitability? How do I mitigate or reduce risk? How do I create long-term value creation when I don't even know what value creation is coming out of the new norm? These are all the kind of questions that great brand leaders have to ask, but managed properly, great brands can do all of this. How? Well, it's regardless of who the stakeholder, who's involved with your brand. It could be your customers, the people who come into your store or buy your product or service. If I can change their behavior by getting them to pay more or to buy more, I can improve my revenues and reduce my risk. My suppliers, my partners in my supply chain, I can get better terms, lower prices, and drive down costs, and in some cases even increase revenue. My employees, how do I get better retention, especially at a time like today when everybody's grasping at the unknown? Keeping qualified candidates is probably the toughest job for a lot of businesses, because that can improve and reduce my costs and improve my productivity. My shareholders, whether it's my bank, whether it's institutional shareholders, how do I get higher price to earnings ratios, lower volatility? How can I lower my borrowing costs? That can affect my costs and risks. And other stakeholders, it could be the government, it could be environmentalists, it could be people like the Chamber of Commerce. How can I improve my conditions that lower my costs and risks? So when you manage your brand as an asset, as a total business system, it affects all of these different stakeholders. And it does it in a way that has and creates value. Great brands, on average, versus other brands in a category, deliver about a 7 times multiple in terms of value. So there may be 3 other flower shops on Main Street, but if I manage mine as a brand and do it well, not only can I be a stronger, better, healthier flower shop, I can have much greater value. So this is why managing your brand as an asset becomes important. If you don't believe me, look at the facts. Here's, unfortunately, I could only update this chart today up to 2015, but I know up until 2019, this trend got even greater. What you see is the S&P 500, so the stock market, its value, and what drove that value in the stock market. And you can see the difference between the growth in intangible assets, which your brand is considered an intangible asset. It's not bricks, mortar, machinery, automobiles, whatever it might be. And you can see how it's swung. The big driver to this is obviously technology, software, where IP and patents have become important and have driven value in companies like Microsoft or Google or Amazon. But you can see that the growth is in intangible assets. And you can see that that has taken place across just about every sector, even right down to something that you think is commoditized as iron, steel, building materials, right? But for retail, software, electronics, you can see the lion's share of what has driven the value in the businesses is actually the intangible assets, and your brand is the biggest one of those. So the contribution of these intangible assets is an increasingly significant driver to overall market value, and you should be taking advantage of that. So how do we create an opportunity out of issues? Well, let's just look through Brand Finance 101. We all want to improve our net income. Well, okay, let's break it down. What is net income? Well, margin, unit margin times unit volume. What drives margin? Well, price less cost. Volume is my share within a market. So if I can improve my margin and get more volume, I end up with a more valuable business. Against each one of these sub-drivers, price, cost, share, and market size, you can see that brands contribute directly to improvements in any one of them. And if you think of your brand as an asset and as a business system, you might start to use your brand in new and different ways. It's not just your website or your flyer or what you may send out into the market to advertise a new promotion. It could be something that drives your innovation, brings a new capability into the market, drives discretionary spending lower, improves or takes away barriers to entry, gets you into new businesses. So I'm asking that you, at least for today, step back and look at your brand in a much broader sense. Because brands actually can also drive change, the thing that we've said we're all living through. And that change can take place at 4 different levels. It could actually help you focus and improve your business so that your operational levels have changed. Yeah, what we're doing is right, but we need to do it better. Okay, my brand might direct how and where I focus that effort. It can become a rallying point. You know, I think what we're doing is right, but we might need to refocus, or boy, we got to change the way we think and act. The world has changed to such a degree, and I need a new North Star, a new vision for the company. Or it can be a paradigm shifter. Boy, we are in such trouble. If we don't recreate, we're out of business. So it can become a game changer. And I want to talk to you now about how you might do some of that. The components of a brand strategy affect your culture within your organization, what kind of products and customers you decide to go after, and importantly, which ones you won't. Because by focusing, you actually can create greater value. A sense of purpose and direction, so you can create priorities. In today's world, there's probably more things you need to do than resources available. So your brand can help be that strategic roadmap to help determine what those priorities are. It allows you to remain alert and change and act in the market with speed and agility. And boy, in today's space, that's exactly what we're all, if I hear the word pivot one more time, but that's, everybody is pivoting. That's what we're talking about. But your brand can tell you which way to pivot. Being able to change doesn't mean you should. Being able to change in a way that creates value is what your brand can help direct. It can also keep you on time and on budget. It helps you make decisions, what you will do, what you won't do. And it can become a common performance management system. How does everybody, all those people under the waterline of the iceberg, how do they all contribute to the value of that total brand and that business? So you can see your brand can be used in a whole range of different ways in creating change and then driving change through your organization. This is an interesting fact that I want to share with you. So now that you've kind of think of brands in a broader sense, I want to talk to you about what drives choice for a brand, both in the market, why somebody would buy you, stay with you, become loyal to you, but also, as we talked about, maybe why an employee would decide to come and work with you or stay with you even through these difficult and troubled times. Well, in creating a proprietary tool that we created, what we found was people actually make decisions cognitively and emotionally. They think things through. They look at the rational facts and make good decisions, but also guiding their decisions are how those decisions make them feel. So the emotional response. And interestingly, the emotional drivers to a business are about equal to the rational drivers. The difficulty is, as we discovered in developing this tool with quite a renowned team, 5 different teams of neuroscientists, that's all wonderful, but human beings can't articulate emotion. If you ask somebody how your brand makes them feel, you'll get an answer. It makes me feel and Well, that's great. Men on average can articulate 10 emotions. I see all the women smiling. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, ladies, women can articulate about 14. So they don't run away with the show. Call it a draw at 12. That covers most human beings. What we discovered with these neuroscientists is every human being, rich, poor, doesn't matter what part of the world you live in, doesn't matter your gender, doesn't matter whether you're educated or not educated. Every human being is actually pre-programmed in their limbic system with 96 emotions, separate, identifiable, different emotions. And then they all permutate and combinate. So you will always feel a decision before you actually act on a decision. It makes you feel confident, trusted, peace of mind. So you'll get these feelings that you're doing the right thing, and then you'll make the right decision. So understanding that emotional side to how your brand's promise actually resonates in the market is a very important and a difficult thing to try to figure out. Why? Because, as I say, human beings can't articulate emotion. So using these tools, it helps draw out those other 84 emotions and how they might be reacting and interacting with one another towards your business. So you can develop a much deeper understanding of what the market is looking for and what it wants if you can understand the emotional quotient behind a brand. I could go on for an hour on this topic because I spent 5 years building this tool, and it's a fascinating world of science, but I think we should park that for today, and I'm happy to follow up with any of you if you're interested in digging into this a little further. But what we discovered is that 50-50 balance isn't just true on things that you might believe would be emotional. So video on demand, when we created Fibe for Bell and when we created Rogers video on demand product, what we discovered is something that's technology. It's something you hook up to your television or not, actually is more an emotional purchase decision than a rational purchase decision. Your smartphone, even what investment bank you go to, right down to retail brands, which are about 50-50, car brands about 50-50, even management consultants. So all of these different sectors, and I'm giving you just a very small crosscut of the sectors we've applied this thinking to, you can see they all have that emotional quotient, and it's much greater than you probably are giving it credit for. You think that they simply buy on your price or your product and its features, or I can get this or I can get that, but that's all wonderful. By not taking into account this emotional, not only are you shortchanging value creation of your own brand, but as I said earlier, you might be giving away competitive advantage. You might figure out how your flower shop actually is better and more profitable by understanding how it makes people feel. So I'd encourage you to dig into that one. So as I draw this section to a conclusion, because I got to keep an eye on my time, I want to ask you guys a couple of simple questions, and you can just say yes or no to yourself. But during these heady times and changing times, my friends at Environics actually came up with a wonderful checklist that I wanted to share with you, because this might say, yeah, I do need to step back and think about my brand and think about it differently. So questions like, we've lost our focus and we're not sure what direction to take. The people in our organization just aren't feeling aligned and the culture is showing it. Our revenue is declining. If you're saying yes to all three of those, boy, we want to start looking. Our audience has changed, who they are, what they need. We don't understand what our consumers' unmet needs are that I deliver on. The enthusiasm or engagement in my brand, both in the market as well as internally, is waning. Our organization has made a shift in operations and focus, and it really needs to, but I don't know how to do it. We are struggling with change. We know we need to, we don't even know where to start. We've questioned where we fit or how we respond in 2020 because of all of the changing circumstances. I am confused. Employee volunteer turnover is going up. These are people that are just coming in and saying, I'm out of here, sorry. If that's going up, that's a sign of poor brand health. And lastly, we feel like we're never prepared for what's about to happen. I'm always reacting. I'm never proacting in the market. And I'm constantly having to explain to our employees, to our audience, who we are and what we do. And boy, what's troubling is now I'm waking up in the middle of the night in cold sweats because I'm asking myself this question. If you've said yes to at least a third of these questions, now is the time to step back and take a look at your brand. And I'd love to help you. I'd love to talk to you about how to do that and see where your brand might be used in a new and a different way. Because change is the only given. I have now appeared on, I don't know how many podcasts, webcasts, television shows, newspaper interviews where I'm being asked, when is this going to stop? When's change? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't create vaccines. The only thing I can tell you is that coming out the back, whenever it does end, it'll be a different world that we're all living in. And I can either take advantage of that change, or I can do nothing with it and be affected and afflicted by all of this change and become one of those products that I shared with you at the beginning. The key things that, just as indicators, this is some data that I was able to find just before this session. This shows you the magnitude of the change. And this is just simply online shopping habits. We all know that, hey, if I can't sell here, I got to sell online. This is what's happened just since mid-March. You can look at the level of online shopping that Canadians are doing on a monthly and a weekly basis. Now, you might look at that and go, that's like 3 or 4 percentage points. But when you apply that to total GDP, that is millions, and hundreds of millions of dollars that have shifted into a new distribution channel, a new way for people to engage with your brand. I can't engage people the same way here as I did when they walked into my store. The average monthly online spending has gone up a whopping amount. I mean, from $262 online before COVID to $316. So that is a huge level of increase. So not only are they doing it more often, they're actually spending more when they do it. So this space is your new distribution channel. If you're not there, or if you don't think you're there in an optimized way, you better start looking at how your brand can get you there. And oh, by the way, that doesn't matter what sector you're in. This is a before and after in terms of people shopping most often online. And I don't care whether we're talking groceries, footwear, furniture, sporting goods, women's clothing, jewelry, massive increases in how people are engaging with all of these different product categories. So if you're not online, you're missing out on where the world is changing to. And I found this an interesting thing. This is a freebie. When you do go online, free shipping seems to be a very important thing for people. Not only can they buy you, but you get it to them. You've taken away risk to them. I don't have to go out. So there's convenience, but I also don't have to go out and maybe, be exposed to the coronavirus. So online shipping is very, very important. 94% of Canadian adults are saying now that they are researching products online before they buy. So if you don't have a website that helps them do that research, you are missing out on an unmet need in the market. And this is just a quick example of, they're not just going to one website, they're going to all of the major retailers. So you've got to be present everywhere that is drawing the digital audience. And again, the attitudes around online shipping, you can see they want this stuff, they want to buy it from you, they'll buy more from you, they'll spend more with you if you get it to them. So I found that to be an interesting little insight maybe for how you're running your business and growing your brand. The very first question, and I will wrap this up now, that I always ask a client when we start with them as they go to step back and think about their brand. It's a simple question, but a very difficult one to answer. What business are you in? I pause there for dramatic impact, but I also pause there so you can try to answer the question. And I'll bet you a lot of you said, well, I sell shoes. I make pencils. To which I respond quite politely, good, but I didn't ask you what you made. I didn't ask you even what you sold. I asked you what business you're in. Businesses only survive when they create value. I've never known a business to exist that doesn't create value. Shareholders, owners, employees, the consumer. And what creates value? Benefits. So to make my point, I'll tell you a very quick story. When I started Level 5, one of my first clients, that was a buddy of mine from my days at Queen's University, had become the CEO of Crayola Industries. Crayola, we all know Crayola. And he said, we need to really give our brand thinking a shake. And I'd like you to come in and facilitate just with our senior leadership team. He says, but watch out for our CFO. He's a numbers guy and he just thinks all of this stuff is mumbo jumbo. It's all hocus pocus. Fluffy, he called it. I said, oh, that's fine. Thanks for the heads up. We have the session. Very first question I asked the 12 people around the table. All right, Crayola Industries, you're the leaders of it. What business are you in? And as I'm asking, I'm looking right at the CFO. What business are you in? And you can almost see the gentleman roll his eyes like, oh God, here we go. Another one of these. David, we're in the crayons business. Okay, good. I wrote crayons on board. I said, but hey, look at this. It's a magic marker. Crayola, there's your trademark right there. That's not a crayon. Okay, David, we're in the magic markers and the crayons business, writing instruments. Okay. He was playing right into my trap. An hour and a half later, you know what business they were in? Enabling creativity. They were in the business of enabling creativity. That's the benefit that all of the products that they made actually allowed. And the young woman who was in charge of product development, who was the all-star around the table, I got to tell you, she's the one who stepped back and said, okay, so given that kind of new thinking, therefore, we could develop a whole line of products, leveraging our competencies, our manufacturing capabilities, our distribution channels, and we could develop a line of products for architects, draftspeople, engineers, musicians. Said, under this new frame of reference, I call it, yes, you could. It doesn't mean you should. You still have to do the business case development. And is the market there? Is it growing? Can you make money at it, et cetera, et cetera. But you weren't even thinking about these changes that your brand could move to because you thought you were in the crayons business. You were thinking about what you made or sold. You weren't thinking about the benefits to the market. that you create as a result of doing that. So I'd encourage all of you to maybe step back coming out of today and ask yourself, if you now believe your brand is an asset, what business is that brand in? And apply that kind of logic to it. Think about its benefits, not its features. And in doing so, you'll start to unleash maybe where some of that emotional value might be in your brand. Because those two things combined really help you kickstart a rethink of your brand. So what does this all mean for you? Well, what I outline in this new book is, most of you have probably heard about the new 4 Ps of marketing. Well, I kept saying brand management is not marketing management. Brand is an asset, and it's therefore the leaders of the organization that have to run this. So the 4 Ps of brand management are people. What kind of people? What competencies? What values do they have? How do they fit within our culture? How do they reinforce our productivity? Core processes. I'm talking the 3 or 4 that are critical to you consistently keeping your promise. How do you turn those things into IP, intellectual property? How do you do it differently? How could you trademark it? How could you patent it? Because that, as you saw earlier, is what's driving value in the market. And lastly, partnerships. How can I bring other groups in to help me deliver on this? Because I need to do what I do well, but it might not be enough to deliver on this evolved promise to the market. So how do I strategically bring in the right partner? Because the consumer and the customer now owns your brand. You no longer own it. You manage it, and you manage it for its value. But if you don't believe, especially after looking at those online statistics, that the market is actually the ones who own your brand, then you've got another problem that you've got to deal with, and it's between your ears. It's your perspective. And I would really encourage you to give that new perspective its fair due. Last thing, therefore, it is up to the CEO. It's up to the owner of the business to drive all of this, because the CEO is really, the owner is the only one who can define an organization's purpose, why we exist, where we're going, why we're doing this, what we do. It's at the top that leadership is provided. Brand management always starts at the top and is owned at the top. It is not something you pass off to your marketing department. And hopefully I've given you some reasons to believe that. Leadership can create consensus. They can drive alignment across the organization so that everybody understands where we're going, what benefits we're creating in the market, how do we have to consistently keep that promise to the market, and importantly, your role in helping do that. Change. Change starts at the top. As I say, perspective. If you don't want to change, why would you expect your organization to change? So that has to start, and brand-driven CEOs, in the research I did for this new book, are truly accountable for that change. Accountability. Brand measurement drives performance, as we talked about, and a brand promise, once it's developed, must be understood both internally and externally. And again, that's the job of the leaders and the owners of the business. It's not your marketing campaign, it's how you organize and communicate the purpose and the direction that your brand and its business is taking. So your brand can do one of two things. It can create opportunities for you, or you can suffocate in doing nothing. Right? You can be like those products I showed you at the beginning. We are all going through a terrible time, but what's the old saying? You know, as a door closes, a window opens. The market is showing us new ways, new unmet needs are developing every day. Stepping back and understanding how I can evolve my brand to take advantage of those is amazing. I spoke to 3 CEOs, one who owns a very large Canadian manufacturer of t-shirts and hoodies and sweatpants. They do have a lot of elastic in it and a lot of material. Well, when the PPE crisis hit, they weren't selling too many hoodies. They took what they had in terms of raw materials and said, we can make PPE. we've got all the right components. Let's make something that the market needs. They have since driven $150 million of new revenue through their business system and utilized capacity that would have been dormant in their manufacturing facility. They've been running at 110% capacity and shipping it offshore, the PPE. Another company who was a startup in spirits, a craft distiller. So they made gins and vodkas. Well, one component of that is alcohol. When this hit, people were still drinking, unfortunately, with the pandemic, but they were finding themselves with underutilized capacity and alcohol. Well, hand sanitizer. They had a bottle and a filling station that could fill bottles. And so they created hand sanitizer out of the byproduct of their vodkas and their gins. And they drove $55 million of new business. So in crisis comes opportunity, but it all starts with how you think about it, because that requires you to redefine what business am I in, evolve my thinking and my organization around its brand, and I'm the one that's got to do it. I have to lead all of that. And I found as I wrote those 3 words that it's very interesting that when I looked at the mandate of the organization that you're all with this morning, it's very similar: inspire, empower, and equip. In some ways, I'm saying the same things, I'm just saying it through the lens of your brand. All of this is in this new book that I've just written. You can get it, this is my shameless plug, try to sell books. You can get it at all the usual places. And I would love to have the opportunity to discuss it and any of the other concepts or questions that you may have. Thank you so much for your time and listening to me and hopefully changing your perspective about the role of your brand.
David, thank you so much. Every time I spend time with you, I learn so much. I cannot thank you enough for being here today. And also very excited to confirm that everyone participating today is going to receive a copy of your wonderful new book. David took the time to sign each one. And I love that as part of the attribution that he's included the Chamber brand promise, which is bringing life to business, as part of the book signing. So thank you so much, everyone. If you haven't already made arrangements, you can pick up a copy at Tourism Burlington's offices at 414 Locust Street. They are waiting for you there. But before we move into that, I also want to say that once you read the new book, my playbook has been the value of a promise consistently kept for the last 5 years. I have read it more times now than I can even recall, and I've given more copies away as gifts to those that I value so much. So that's also a must read for everyone. But before we wrap up, does anyone have a question for David? He's such a font of wisdom and insight. If anyone wants to put their hand up. We are recording today's session. The slides and this discussion will be published on our YouTube channel. So lots of insight to take away, lots to think about for everyone. But if there's a leading question anyone on the line would like to pose, we have a minute or two for that.
Anne-Marie had her hand up.
Okay, great. Anne-Marie. Yeah.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
David, I'm a marketer. I love every single thing you said.
Thank you.
And one of the things I hear often from clients, and I thought it might be a relevant question for those in the group, is that particularly with small businesses, and especially if they're a professional service, I find in particular, there's confusion between brand and business strategy, and especially if their brand is, many small business owners think of the brand as themselves. So I'm wondering if there's any adaptations to what you've said for those smaller businesses that have, their brand is, it's not a Crayola, right? It's not so how do some of those smaller businesses take, especially when it's tied to their own personal identity?
Right. Well, it's a great question. And it's funny, a young gentleman that worked for me at Labatt was given a great opportunity to start a business in Los Angeles in the entertainment world. And he asked if I'd come in and help him figure it out, because they'd gone off and bought a bunch of stuff, right? But one of the biggest things they bought were the artists. So the rights to the artists and their catalog of music and things like that. And he said, boy, I know what I've bought. I know what I got. I don't know who we are. And I don't know, therefore, how to market it. So we pulled it all together and we created Live Nation. So if you guys have gone to a concert or something, you've probably seen Live Nation. So Live Nation actually came out of this. But one of the first assignments he gave me once we'd created Live Nation was with this really great young singer out of South America. And she was very popular in her home country, but really there was, her name was wrong, or she didn't think of herself as a brand. She didn't apply all the same logic that, you know, what business am I really in? Yes, I sing. It's like I make crayons, I sing, and I entertain people, but what's the benefit to them of what I sing and how I entertain them? And without going too far along, we went through the exact same process that we've just talked about, and we created a brand called Shakira. And she's done okay. That wasn't her name when we first met. And her manager at the time said, this is all bogus. This is all kind of like that CFO at Crayola. It's like, come on. This is about selling tickets, putting bums in seats and, you know, making the money. Yes, I know, but I want them to pay twice as much for a ticket when they go and put their bum in that seat. I want them to buy the t-shirt. I want them to buy the next 3 albums. I want them to, so you got to think about it in a different way. So you got to think about the benefit that her talent actually created. So professional services are in the exact same realm. I think of myself as a brand. You're a brand. We're all brands. We all have something that is a unique selling proposition to the market that Anne-Marie makes you different than Carla versus Ashley. So what's that DNA that makes you different at what you do? And by looking at it through a brand, it's not what you think, it's what the market thinks is unique about you. And you can test that. Simply go and ask 10 of them. You don't need a big study to be able to do that. And sooner or later, you will find that there is something that's unique about how you do what you do. And now you translate that to, good, what's the benefits that I create to that as a result of doing it that way? That's what I market, are the benefits, not me, the single shingle lawyer or consultant or whatever the professional service may be. And that's what Shakira did.
Thank you. I think Bridget had a question as well. If we have time.
We have just 1 minute, so we'll have to be quick, but yeah, go ahead, Bridget.
Okay, it's going to be hard to be quick, but I love the presentation and I love Anne-Marie's question too. So and just piggybacking on the comment around the confusion between brand and business strategy, it's something that I'm thinking about a lot. So my question, I'm trying to keep this brief, David, is when you have a brand that is representing very different but complementary market segments or pillars of the business. So for example, we have Nouveau Network, we have studio business, we have office space, we have a catering business, we have events, and then we have this overarching Nouveau Network, which we've articulated what our mission is and our values. But any tips or guiding kind of statements or thoughts around how you keep brand consistency? So I'm really thinking about the Crayola example, and then there being markers and having had kids, you know, and all the sub things that come out of it. But what sticks in my mind is those were Crayola products.
Exactly, and you just put your finger on it. What you're talking about is a well-documented area of study, and it's called brand portfolio architecture. And again, to make it super simple, there are really 4 different types of architectures. How you put things together is what you're talking about, and which way creates the greatest value, both for the market as well as for yourself as a company. And the 4 range from, you build what's called a branded house. So the Crayola was a branded house. It didn't matter what the product was, it carried the Crayola trademark. General Electric, geez, they made everything from light bulbs to outdoor toilets to jet engines. It didn't matter what the product was. They looked at each of those categories and said, Jack Welch at the time said, we'll be number 1 or 2 in every single one of those sectors, but they will all be branded GE. You go all the way to the opposite end and you develop a house of brands, where the owner actually decides not to market their ownership brand, your umbrella, and because it's better to segment the market. There's enough business to be had to build 4 or 5 individual brands and to take them to the market individually. The ownership brand plays no commercial role, but might play a very important operational role to create synergies and productivity. And then 2 in the middle are a hybrid, it's called, where it's some products like Disney. Some are the Disney theme park, the Disney animation, Disney, but then they also own ESPN. So, and the Disney brand isn't attached to it at all. So that's a hybrid. And then another one is called an endorsed portfolio. So think of the automobile companies. So General Motors, Chevrolet, General Motors, Cadillac, General Motors, Buick. They leverage the equity of each. And what that means is that you've got a very different marketing job to do, depending on which of those architectures you decide on. And you decide which one to take based on the markets that you're serving, how different they are, and how valuable and how much growth, profitable growth you can get out of each of them. I don't know whether that, I can certainly, if you want to follow up with me, I can actually send you a visual all on one page that summarizes all of that. So.
That was golden. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks, David. I wish we had more time with you today. There's never enough time when we're chatting, but perhaps we'll have you come back afterwards. Yes, and I know that you're going to be staying on, and we do have a break coming up, so a terrific opportunity for people to speak with you more, and perhaps we'll prevail upon you to come back and join us another time, because
I'd love to. Thank you so much for the opportunity and a chance to meet everybody.
Well, thank you.